He asked what I did for a living while I was working on the graduate degrees. I graduated from Wheaton College and started, I didn't know I wanted to be a conductor. I was a piano major. And I loved piano, and I loved everything about piano. But I began in my senior year to overthink a little bit. The things that were always pretty intuitive for me started to become a little harder, like memorization. Because I started thinking, oh, is that fourth finger or fifth finger? I just go, huh. And I had a couple of teachers with whom I had taken conducting classes who stopped me in the hall independently and said, you know, Jerry, you might think about being a conductor. I see some potential. And I hadn't thought about it. I was a senior in college. I was married. My wife and I were married in our junior and senior years. And I thought, but I did love everything about the process. And so I thought, well, I'll apply to graduate school in conducting. And if I get in, I'll be a conductor. And if I don't get in, I'll stop. I don't know. There was no plan B at that point. I'm 21, okay? So I wrote to a conductor for whom I had a great deal of respect, John Nelson, who's a wonderful conductor. And I said, where would you, if you were in my shoes, where would you go to school? And he recommended 3 conducting teachers. He said, I'm assuming you want to be a choral conductor, so I would recommend these 3 places. I didn't know if I wanted to be a choral conductor or an orchestral conductor. I was a pianist. I could have done either one because I loved all of that repertoire. But he said, I would really encourage you, at Indiana University, Julius Herford was a faculty member at Indiana, and Julius Herford was a guru of score study, how to study scores. And he'd been Robert Shaw's teachers, and Robert Shaw is somebody that you probably don't know, but because he's in the last generation, but he was one of America's greatest choral conductors, and he'd been Shaw's Julius Herford. So I said, okay, I'll audition, and because Julius Herford only worked with choral conductors, I'll become a choral conductor. And so I went to IU and did a master's degree, and then worked in Indiana for 4 years at a liberal arts college, Huntington College, and then went to Santa Barbara, California, and worked at Westmont College, another liberal arts college, and then went to the University of Southern California and did a doctorate there. And during those times, I had a church music position. We had children during that time, our son and daughter, and my wife worked some during that time and took care of lots of kids. But the opportunity to work with them, we had no money, are you kidding? It was, you know, we were all, please don't let the car break. But we made it happen, and there was no other choice. And it was not any sort of disaster. It was simply, this was our dream, and we wanted to make this happen. There was only one time. I grew up on a farm in northern Kansas, and there was only one time that I called my father. Probably get a little emotional about it because my father's no longer living, but I called my dad and said, I think I want to come back to the farm. I think I want to just give it up. Because it was too hard. We were moving to Los Angeles, and Los Angeles is a big city to move to. We had 2 little kids. We had no place to live, you know, other than we were going to go down and look for a place to live. It was all just a mess, and he said, just take your time. You can always come back, but see what happens. He was wise. Because within a couple of weeks, things did fall into place. That's most often the case. You know, if it's supposed to happen, things will happen. It might not happen the way you imagine it. Certainly won't happen the way you plan it. But things will work out. So that's how I fed the family when I was getting the graduate degree. I do own a pair of cowboy boots, by the way. And I was supposed to wear them, and Mr. Seeloff helped me buy those cowboy boots in Odessa? Yes, in Odessa. And I do wear them. And I go to school in the north, and I go, you have cowboy boots? And I go, yes, sir, I do. I have cowboy boots. Gotcha. Okay, what else? Yeah.
What was it like winning Grammys?
What it was like winning Grammys? No, there's some stories about winning the Grammys. It was a really huge project. For a chorus of 320 singers or so, it was a huge chorus. It was all the choirs, the 3 big choirs at the University of Michigan, the children's choir from Michigan State University, and it was the orchestra from the university, and Leonard Slatkin was the conductor. You might know Mr. Slatkin's name. And really, really great soloists that were brought in for this huge project. And we recorded 2 dress rehearsals and the performance. The producer, the recording engineer was fantastic. He also won a Grammy for recording, the engineer of the year that year as well. People were so, and the music's hard. It's fantastic, but it's hard. It's William Bolcom's Songs of Innocence and of Experience. And so it's a relatively new piece. It was probably 25 years old by the time we did it. But it's about 2 hours and 15 minutes long. It's like 25 movements. It's a huge piece. And when we were done with it, we were just done with it. You know, we had worked so hard. It had taken so many hours. And we were just done with it, and we moved on, did other stuff. And then it was nominated for all these Grammys. It was nominated for Best Choral Performance, nominated for Best Orchestral Album of the Year, Classical Album of the Year, for Best Engineered Album, Best Recording of Contemporary Work, all these. And so then, those of us that were involved, I was chorus master for the project, and we had invitations to go to the Grammy Awards. And I said, we're never going to win. I'm not going to go. Are you kidding? So I didn't. And one of the other people involved in the project said, you know, I'm never going to have this opportunity again. I'm going to go. I said, and his name was William. I said, William, if you go, if you're going to go, great. If we win, you go up and accept it. Okay, great. And then I said, call me from backstage if we win. And I went to, it was on, that year the Grammys I think were on a Monday. And I actually forgot about it. And I went to school and I did the thing and I came home from school and my phone rang and it was William said, we won! We won! And I went up and I accepted. And I went, cool, that's great. So, great, you know. So then about 15 minutes later, he called back, we won again! We won again! And I thank God and I thank my mother and father. And then, so he had the opportunity to go and accept us. The classical awards are made in the afternoon. So, because if you watch the Grammys at night, you never see anything about the classical awards. I mean, there are like 90-some categories. And at night, you know, you just see Billie Eilish win 12,000. And a little story, my former student is her voice teacher. And he knew her from when she was here, and her brother was here, and they sang in his youth choir. And she was just Billy, and Phineas was just Phineas. And he goes to their house and gives them voice lessons you know, where they have a piano in their bedroom. So when she sang at the Oscars the other night, they spent the afternoon together, and he helped her get ready for that performance. And it's just, she's Billy and he's Phineas. And they're going to do fine. Okay. Any other questions? Yes. You know, what comes to my mind, I have done all of these pieces at some other time, at some other place, you know, at various places in my life. But I've not done the Rushmore for 6 years. Yesterday morning was the first time I had heard Mount Rushmore in 6 years. To hear it live. You know, I had not listened to my recording of it. I have a recording of it, but I didn't listen to it. I listened to some of Carl St. Clair's recording, who commissioned Mr. Doherty for the piece. But as a conductor, you don't have the luxury of practicing, except you study and you imagine. And I encourage all conductors to listen to as many recordings you can get your hand on. But yesterday was the first time that I heard it live again. And so it wasn't new because I did my homework and I was ready for you. Choosing the pieces, I wanted something to start with that was loud, rhythmic, and that we could get into and not have to worry about anything. When you start that piece, you can just go there. If we would have started with the Rachmaninoff, it would be much harder, because you have to be in the zone. You know, your body and your voice have to be all warmed up. But I wanted also something, you know, originally we cut a few pieces, if you recall, I don't know, because of time. But we're going to do another Rachmaninoff. We were also going to do something else. We were going to skip another. Yeah, skip another. The time got in the way, and we had cut a little bit. But the other Rachmaninoff, if you worked on, is very beautiful too. I wanted something that this group, this many singers, this beautiful choir could sound spectacular. And the Rachmaninoff, that says Rachmaninoff to me. The Brahms, some of the folks involved suggested that. Said, would you consider doing the Geistliches beat? And it's been a piece that I've loved for a long, long time. I said, yeah, let's do it. And they said, you have orchestra, you do whatever you want to with the orchestra. And I thought Mount Rushmore would be, we're in the West, we're in the heartland in many ways, and we're Americans, and Mount Rushmore says that to me, and I thought we could do that. And some of those words are words we need to hear today. And so that's why I chose that. And then I wanted to end with something. I didn't want to end with the Mount Rushmore because it ends too sadly. It's not really sad, but it ends so introspectively. You know, as you listen to it, you think, it's true. That trumpet figure, the very end of Mount Rushmore, if you listen to Mahler 5, I think it's Mahler 5, that's very similar to a trumpet figure in the Mahler. So I wanted to end that, and Unclouded Day would take us where I think we needed to go. That was my process. Yeah. A little bit, but not as much, not as, okay, this is all going to fit together like a big puzzle. It was more about pacing of the concert. Knowing that if Mount Rushmore was the centerpiece of the concert, how could we build around that and make it coherent? Oh. Yes? I love you too.
Okay, so we had a question from Kevin who's still the fantasy. So the third set of why then should I be afraid? Could we start like a clap there?
If Mr. O'Regan didn't ask for clapping, we're not going to put claps in.
Okay.
All right? If he did, and I know him pretty well, if he did, I'd do it.
It's all her idea.
It was all... Oh, good. We have time for one more question over here, and then we have someone to ask us some things. Yes. She asked, when did I know when I wanted to spend my life working in music? I'll give you a little bit more of background. I grew up on a farm in northern Kansas, as I said, and I went to a country school. So my first 4 years went to country school, which was a one-room school with one teacher and all 8 grades. And there were 12 students in the room. Think Little House on the Prairie, okay? And there were I was the only first grader. There were no second graders. There were 3 third graders. No other class had more than 200. So there were 12 of us in those 8 grades, but there were never 8 grades because there was always a year that there wasn't anybody of that age. I didn't go to kindergarten because there wasn't a kindergarten. My first grade teacher was a first year teacher. So imagine being a first year teacher and you're not teaching one grade, you're teaching all the grades. And you're teaching all the classes of all the grades. And if it was time for reading, I went up to the teacher's desk and she pulled out that little oak tray beside her chair, and we did reading together, and then the next group went up and did reading. And so one of the wonderful things about that room was that we heard everybody's classes. So as a first grader, I listened to the third graders learn, and we learned things together as a whole group, and she was a good pianist, and we sang together a lot, and learned all these folk songs. And at the end of that year, she said to my parents, "He's a bright little boy. I'm afraid he's going to get bored. Why don't you give him piano lessons?" And being a farm family, I don't know, giving piano lessons to the boy was not necessarily what would have necessarily happened. My sisters played, my mother played, my father didn't play, but he would come in from working on the tractor in the field all day, horse because he'd been singing all day. And to hear yourself sing over a tractor, you sing pretty loudly. And he'd come in hardly able to speak because he'd been singing all day. And usually gospel songs or other songs, folk songs that he knew or whatever. And so I started piano lessons. I was 7 and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And my parents said, you never have to practice. If you don't want to do it, you don't have to. If you want to do it, you can. It's completely up to you. You can stop whenever you want to. And I loved it. Only one time they said, I think I want to stop. And they said, okay, that's fine. And then I thought, oh, they mean it. Oh, if I stopped, I'll never do this again. No, I'm going to stay. And I was probably 3rd or 4th grade at that point. By sophomore year in high school, I knew I wanted to be a musician. And that was, you can figure out when I grew up because people were getting ready to land on the moon. Okay, so this is in the 60s. And in the 60s, I was completely in love with everything having to do with the space program and space and astronomy, and I thought I either want to do that or I want to be a pianist. And being a pianist, one, because I would never become an astronaut because there's not enough space in that space capsule for me. It would be too scary. So that's what I knew. Yeah, good. Jed, talk to us.
I just got a couple of items, but let's give it for Dr. Blackstone.